Enrichment, Enlightenment, Transformation. Rabbi Yisroel Cutler, the spiritual leader of Chabad of Cary, North Carolina, guides anyone who has been searching for a meaningful life and conscious living. Join our discussions about the mundane, our daily activities, and then infuse every day with a spiritual twist from the inspired sages of the Talmud and Jewish mysticism, which many call Kabbalah. We learn from the root source of all religious monotheistic traditions and delve into the symbolism and levels of meaning from biblical stories.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to those tuning in from all over the world. If you are listening to the program, we would love you to let us know via the chat box. Feel free to ask questions. And we're sorry for the late start this morning, but we have a fun class up ahead. So it will be a Purim class. The holiday of Purim is this Wednesday night and Thursday. And while we have discussed Purim here together before, we've never hit this dimension of the story. It's going to be a legal class, a legal ethical question. Has anyone here ever been in a situation in which they have the ability to help someone save someone, but with some peril to themselves, or at least the risk of some danger to themselves, and having to make a decision whether or not to take action? And you said you were a volunteer firefighter, so that's
all the time.
all the time. So, but you signed up for that.
Yes.
Okay. And this is Bert.
Welcome, Bert.
Thank you.
We live in a country where that's not required. It's never required, for the most part, to take action. It can't be held against you by not taking action. There was a story in the 1960s in New York, famous story where there was a girl, have her name over here. She was living in Kew Gardens.
Kitty Genovese.
Oh, wow. And that was, you remember the story. So why don't you tell us about what happened there?
Well, she was being attacked, and about 20 or 30 people in the apartment saw it, and nobody did anything, and she died. She got killed. One or two called 9/11, but nobody tried to intercede.
And I heard even the call to 9/11 was somewhat delayed.
Right.
In the sense of
Right.
people not, just
This is a
live
classical-
and let live
Right.
kind of
So-
idea.
This is a case you study in Psychology 101,
Really?
where everybody thought that somebody else was calling 911 or calling the police, and surely somebody
Yeah,
else, and
yeah.
nobody did.
So the reason was people thinking someone else is doing
Right.
it, but it was not
Yeah,
I misunderstood that people didn't want to get
But
involved.
That's part of it, but also.
Part of it,
Also, nobody tried to intercede,
Right.
and they could have yelled or screamed or interceded, so people were scared to go down and actually do something. So it was more than just them
Right.
hesitating to call, it's that nobody went to her aid.
Wow.
And there was so many
Wow.
people that
That's
saw
so
it.
Well, even look at the rape on the beach last year in spring break. People were videoing it, not where they could have easily stopped it.
And it's nice to talk about everyone else. Was anyone here ever in a situation where they found themselves in that situation where they had to take action? If you would care to share. Right about closing that door, sometimes we're loud for the other offices. Thank you.
Mountain climbing.
Didn't something like that happen just this very recently in the newspaper that I read about?
I mean, there are the stories where people take a stand out. Unfortunately, there are many situations, whether it's stopping a terror attack or whatnot, where you have the ability to act. And our question today is going to be contrasting, I guess, the secular law perspective in which, in most cases, you are not obligated or required. I think today some states have some, and Marty, you might be more familiar. I know when it comes to abuse and molestation today, there are some laws in place about needing to report. But generally speaking, inaction cannot be held against you.
Reminds me of a Seinfeld episode.
Now what?
I think the second to last episode.
yeah. Tell me, because
The second to last episode of the entire Seinfeld series, they were traveling someplace, and the plane had a problem, had to stop in Massachusetts. They were in Lowell, Massachusetts was the name of the town. And they saw they were killing time.
right.
And they're standing on the street sidewalk, and they saw very large person getting out of his car and being robbed, and they just stood there and did nothing and was taking video of the entire incident,
Right.
and then they got thrown in jail because they didn't help this guy.
Okay, so we're thrown in jail.
The
Story
town
I
had just,
heard-
the town had just made an ordinance that you have to have.
There was a Hasidic woman actually in Brooklyn that just stopped someone from jumping from a bridge the other day. It was very interesting in New York, and it was in a lot of the papers. But that's scary also. You know, imagine stopping your car on a bridge.
Wow.
That's scary, and you don't know who this person is. So that is going to be our discussion today. Now, from our discussions before, we know that Judaism will require more of us than secular law will in this area of law. Let's do text 1. This is someone who is contrasting secular law with Jewish law. Hal, why don't you begin? Text 1.
But my
Just to
mouth
come-
is
yeah.
full.
Your mouth is full.
I waited for that one.
Does it on purpose. Western jurists do not believe that a person can be made to act positively in order to rescue someone else. As Hall explains, we do not believe that every man must be his brother's keeper.
It's funny how that became the source text. Am I my brother's keeper? Now, in Cain's case, he did more than passive. He actually murdered his brother. But the verse he said is, even if I saw it, it's not my responsibility. Am I my brother's keeper? And to a large part, there is that perspective today of live and let live. So that is our question of discussion today. Do you have a moral obligation to help someone in need? Let's go back to the Brooklyn Bridge case. To stop your car and do that.
Well, moral in Judaism, yes, I think
Yeah.
you do. It's part of the commandments to save a life, that you do everything
Right.
to save a life. And that brings up the difference in Jewish law. Jewish law is based on responsibility or obligation.
Okay.
You have obligate, where American law is based on responsibility. So that's.
So American law is based upon rights. Is that what
Right,
you're
right,
going to say?
right,
Yeah.
it's not responsibility.
That's a
Right.
very
And Jewish law
important
is obligation,
distinction.
Right,
Judaism is very much responsibility based.
right, obligation.
So even something or obligation based. So even something as simple as educating a child, as opposed to wording it as every child has a right to education, Torah says parents have the obligation to educate their children. Everything is phrased in a way of what our responsibility is.
I have a question.
Yes.
So in the fire service, you get into really interesting situations whereby you're not from a religious perspective.
Sure.
but You're not required to trade your life for somebody else's
Well, we're
life.
getting there. So hold it. So the first good point. The first idea here is that we acknowledge, and we'll see the source text in a moment, that Judaism is responsibility based. The question is, at what odds do we say that? If the child is drowning, God forbid, in the ocean, and you are a pretty decent swimmer, but it's rough out there.
You still do it.
So that is our question, and similar situations like that. The only question, the fire situation is a little different if you signed up to be that. I think that might have its own discussion in Torah. We'll talk today from the perspective of a regular person. When you witness something that does involve some element of danger, what is your responsibility? Now, you might wonder, what does this have to do with Purim? Any guesses? Any guesses why,
I guess
how
that-
this
that
could
has to
actually
happen.
connect?
Sid has to have the responsibility to chime in because it was danger to
Sure.
her to go to the king, I guess.
So let's take a step back, everyone, and revisit the Purim story. This is a moment in the story that sometimes we forget. It's a turning point in the story. So backtrack. The Purim story we'll read Wednesday night and Thursday. When we read the story, we often read it like it's boom, 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 like sort of a 3-week March Madness kind of. It wasn't. It spanned a great length of time, even more than an election cycle. How long did it span? The whole story? Over a decade. Do you know that?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, over a decade, where the Jews find themselves in Persia, of course, because they were, first they were exiled to Babylonia. Temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. Spent 5-6 decades. The Babylonians are conquered by the Persians. The Jews are under the rule of the Persians and are living under Ahasuerus. And his kingdom spans from Hodu to Kush. Hodu, I believe, is India. and Kush, I believe, is in Africa. So that's quite a superpower. And at the beginning of the story, we start off with this party he has where he gets rid of the former Queen Vashti and he looks for a new Queen Esther. That search takes 3 years.
But Vashti was a powerful woman feminist.
We can have a whole nother class. Let's Vashti's another discussion. Or even the Purim connection here is subtle, so that will really take us off in another
But you know
direction.
what?
But we have another time, Vashti.
No, I don't want to start talking about, but the point of Vashti is that all the whole reading paints her as an ugly and whatever woman, like very negative is what I'm trying to say. Whereas in truth, she probably it wasn't such a negative.
So we need
way
a whole
that they-
discussion
yeah.
on I don't want to do that today.
That's fine. but-
We'll save Vashti for other classes.
Yeah.
Can't do it all today.
They make her look like horrible.
Vashti was dethroned.
Yeah.
Esther, 3 years later, was chosen as queen. Years pass in peaceful times in Persia. So peaceful, in fact, that Esther gets her uncle Mordecai to be an advisor to the king. That's why he's always hanging around. He overhears the plot. He's an advisor to the king. Years pass, then Haman is appointed to the viceroy, the vice president, whatever you want to call it, and he makes the decree on the Jews. From that point in the story, where he says he throws lots, that's why the holiday is called Purim. Purim means lots. A separate class would be why would they name the holiday over the bad part of the story, right? It should be victory. Why would they name the holiday lots, lottery? For another class. He throws lots, and the 13th day of Adar is chosen to be the day in which the Jews were to be, God forbid, annihilated. Okay. What time of year was it at that point on the Jewish calendar when Haman threw the lots?
When he threw the, well,
When he threw the lots and the decree was made to destroy the Jews, God forbid.
Ninth of all.
Oh,
No, that was-
I bet it was Tisha B'Av. No?
It was
That's what I
Passover
said.
time.
That's what I said.
It was actually
Ninth of
Pesach
all.
time. It was actually Passover time. And what is interesting is that when Esther, the story we're going to speak about in a moment, where Esther goes into petition, happens on Passover. But why that is important to us here is there's still 11 months at that point in the story between when the decree was made to when it was supposed to be carried out was 11 months. So from that point on, there's only a year. But the first couple chapters of the Megillah spanned many years. Okay. So the decree is made, yes.
Did the Jews, was that common knowledge?
Yes.
So
yes.
the Jews had 11 months to get out of Dodge?
Well, there's no getting, that problem there was this isn't one country. There was nowhere to escape to, and that's what made the story of Purim so, the potential so horrific in the sense there was nowhere to go. Usually throughout history when there was one evil, person, there was somewhere else to escape to, at least in more modern history. The question was whether you could get there or not. Here, where were you going to go? So there were 11 months in which the decree was looming, but Mordecai took action right away. Mordecai was an advisor, as I said. He knew what was going on. He watched C-SPAN and knew it now. He knew what was going on. He heard the decree was made. He immediately sends his messenger, Hasach, who plays an important, interesting role in the Megillah. He's the back and forth person between Mordecai and Esther. And Hasach tells Esther that Mordecai is dressed in sackcloth and is fasting and is mourning. She wants to know what's going on. Text 2a. Do you want to read, Barbara? We'll go this way.
Then Esther summoned Hatak, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed before her, and she commanded him concerning Mordecai to know what this was and why this was. And Mordecai told him all that had befallen him, and the full account of the silver that Haman had proposed to weigh out into the king's treasuries on the Jews' account, to cause them to perish. And the copy of the writ of the decree that was given in Shushan to destroy them he gave him, to show Esther and to tell her and to order her to come before the king to beseech him and to beg him for her people.
So he sends, a PDF of the decree, and he tells her, you need to petition the king to save the Jewish people. That's what Mordecai asks Esther to do. I told you this is 11 months before the decree. Why don't you continue reading? Esther responds again via this Hasach.
and Esther said to Hadash, and she ordered him to tell Mordecai, All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who comes to the king into the inner court who is not summoned, there is but one law for him, to be put to death, except the one to whom the king extends the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been summoned to come to the king these 30 days.
So that rule applies to everyone, even his wives. You can't just walk in unannounced. It's been a long time since he called me. I don't think it's a good idea for me to walk in right now. I could end up getting killed. That's Esther's response. So, people don't analyze this part of the story often. What's Mordecai's response then to Esther? Anyone remember offhand before you look in?
I assume that you have to go anyway.
So.
Okay. God assembled all the Jews who are.
2C, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. And Mordecai ordered to reply to Esther, do not imagine to yourself that you will escape in the king's house from among all the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and rescue will arise for the Jews from elsewhere, and you will, and you and your father's household will perish. And who knows whether at a time like this you will attain the kingdom.
Harsh.
That's really hard to read.
Harsh. It's hard to read, which tells us we need to understand what is the back and forth. It's hard to understand what he's saying here. What is he saying here?
Well, he's basically saying, you can't hide, you're gonna be.
Caught.
Caught as a Jew
So-
too.
Yeah.
So do it, but don't do it because you're responsible, do it to save your own life. is
Yeah, yeah,
basically what he's
yeah,
saying.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're at no increased peril by
Right.
seeing the king now.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, Esther, up until this point, had concealed her identity.
But she was told to, didn't want.
She was told to conceal. In fact, the word Esther means to conceal. That's what
Oh,
Esther
oh.
means. Yeah, Esther means hidden. She had another name as well. Hadassah.
Hadassah.
Hadassah was her other name.
Oh,
Everyone had two names.
Two names, yeah. Yeah. Usually in the Bible, there's, wait a minute, weren't they called something else another time? Oh, they had two names. They had two names.
But even today we have two names.
Oh, yeah, middle names. Yeah. So she was
We
Esther.
have our English
Oh,
name and our
and-
Hebrew name.
Yeah, there we
We
go.
have two names.
The secret no one knows. What's the rabbi's English name? Oh, you know that one or not? No. Okay.
Oh, I don't know.
All righty. You have to.
But you're not going to tell us?
Did they give
Not
it to
yet.
us? Did you pay
No, no.
attention?
Okay, no. It just it reminded me. All righty, everybody. Let's not for today. Let us go. So this is a harsh response. Harsh response. Don't think you're going to be saved. You're going to die too. And then, if you do remain silent, relief will come from elsewhere, and you will perish. And who knows whether at a time like this you will attain the kingdom.
Yeah,
What's what's going on here? What do you think?
That's
The-
prophecy, that they're gonna be saved, but it won't be you who's gonna.
So why will she perish? If they're saved, why will she perish?
Because she's in his court.
Because she
maybe.
has a chance to do something, and if she
Mhm.
chooses not to do something, she will not. The Jews will be saved because it's God's will,
Right.
but she might not because it's
This is-
her
I mean, this is-
responsibility to.
Whatever the meaning of this response is, Esther changes at this point.
Mhm.
And she immediately turns around and she tells Mordecai, why don't you continue to D now?
Go assemble all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, day and night. Also I and my maidens will fast in a like manner. Then I will go to the king contrary to the law, and if I perish, I perish.
And if I perish, I perish. And when the person reads the Megillah, they read that in a mournful kind of tone. So she agrees to go. If you were at the class the other week, we discussed how could it be that she fasted. You would think that if she was trying to, we know how we look after one day of fasting on Yom Kippur. Just imagine an extended fast. Wouldn't she rely on her beauty, the thing that got her the job in the first place? But we'll have to save that too for another class. Here's the question. It seems as if Esther's only agreeing when Mordecai says, guess what, you're going to be included in the decree. We always have this image of this altruistic Esther, right? That puts herself on the line. So this was a question that arose by some of the commentators. But any thoughts, online community, before we go further about this back and forth between Mordecai and Esther?
I don't see anything yet.
Okay. I find it interesting that it's not discussed much. We always focus on the other parts of the story, but this is clearly an important part of the story. So this commentator, the Malbim, one of the classic commentators on the Megillah, asks, text 3. Want to read? Virgil?
The most astonishing question is this: how was Esther not prepared to risk her life upon hearing that the Jewish people were under the threat of destruction? Her explanation that I have not been called to the king is insipid as unsalted.
I'm not sure what that expression means there.
Unsalted meat. It wouldn't be. It's not properly preserved.
Oh, I
It's
see.
rotten
Good.
meat and-
Yeah. So it just seems odd at a moment like this, everything is on the line, the whole nation, for her to say, I'm afraid of what will happen, doesn't seem like the Esther that we know. So he asks this question. There must be more to this discussion back and forth. So we're going to give 2 or 3 different interpretations. The first is very simple. Esther didn't mean to say, I'm not going at all, but rather, what?
I'll go when I'm summoned.
Exactly. Like we mentioned, there was some time before the decree was going to be carried out.
Shuts up.
So Rashi writes, the decree was in Nisan, the massacre was supposed to be in Adar. Parenthetically, Esther fasted on Passover because the situation called for it. She wanted to pray. We don't observe Esther's fast on Passover. We observe it on the eve of Purim, but that is not actually, there is a traditional fast at the eve of Purim. It's the lightest of all the fast days on the calendar, but there is a traditional fast to remember Esther's fast. I will be fasting tomorrow until the time of the Megillah. We don't do it on the day she fasted, though. That'll be Passover. We have a Seder on Passover. But she, under the circumstances, fasted on Passover. In any event, there was much time before it. And therefore, according to the Vilna Gaon, a famous rabbi in the 1700s living in Vilna, he writes as follows. Why don't you read text 5, Janice?
She said that it will not be effective, and on the contrary, it will ruin things, for it is well known that any man or woman who comes to the king into the inner court unsummoned, there is but one law for him, to be put to death. In all likelihood, he will call for me in the coming days, so why violate his rules for these few days?
Interesting. So that would seem to be another response. That's another way of reading it. Why should I go now? Let me wait for my pitch. And sometimes we're in those situations in life where, on one hand, we want to act now. On the other hand, we might feel that there's a better time. But if you have to read back to the text, what was Mordechai's response to that? Go back to the text. Where was it? Mordechai said, don't imagine that you will escape it. If you remain silent
At this
At
time.
this
at this time, help will come from elsewhere, and who knows whether at a time like this you will attain the kingdom. What is the meaning of those last couple words? There's different ways of reading it. One possibility is, you know what? Remember there was a Vashti? She didn't last. Things are very tumultuous in the king's court. You find yourself in a position now that you're queen, chaperein, as we say in Yiddish, go for it. Who knows what will be if you're waiting for your pitch? Who knows if you will fall out of grace? So that might be the way the Vilna Gaon is reading this story. Who knows at a time like this, meaning when you eventually want to go, if you will still have the opportunity.
Also, the kingdom could be referring to the kingdom, the Olam Haba, the next world. Like, if she doesn't do something, the
Correct.
Jews will be saved, but she will not.
And we're going to get to that interpretation soon, Pam. Absolutely. Any thoughts on this? Anyone ever in those kind of situations where one side of you says, you act now when the inspiration is there, and then the other thing is maybe I should wait for my pitch? Any thoughts?
Well, you're saying, well, maybe if I wait, it'll get better.
Mhm.
Just wait a little, we'll see, it might get better.
It's like
And-
when you're sick and you don't want to see the doctor.
Right.
Say, I don't feel good, but by the time you have to see the doctor, it's almost too late because now you're really sick.
Right. But here, Esther, very practically, is saying, look, at least based upon natural means, I'm the best shot. I'm the best shot. Why ruin it? If I go in and I get killed, it's not just that I'm getting killed, but the whole thing's going to suffer. Why? And Mordechai feels differently. So this is one way of understanding the debate. Who would you, if that is the way the debate truly was, we don't know, how would you feel? I see Esther's position.
I see Esther's position too. If she's willing to do the negotiation when the opportunity is available, that seems, and there seems to be plenty of time,
Right,
then that seems a wise course.
right. And that might be the reason why this interpretation doesn't quite sit right with me, because if that was it, that was the discussion, I could seem to understand Esther's point of view and
Yeah,
what
yeah,
was it that Mordecai said. Any other thoughts? This is open to debate. There's no right or wrong here.
Now, this text is a supposition of the Rabbi of Vilna.
Yeah. And that's the way he's reading this conversation, which, as you pointed out, Brian, is very hard to understand, the whole back and forth. Okay. That is way number one of reading it. Okay, now let's do the second way of reading it. Any questions or comments before we go further? Okay, no. So now we will go back to the way we started the conversation today. Do we have an obligation legally to risk your life to save someone else? Okay. So in the Torah, someone here mentioned the Torah's responsibility, not rights. That is true. Where in Torah does it specifically say you must take action when someone's life's in danger? So there's a verse, the mitzvah, one of the 613 mitzvot is text 8a. Ham. Skipping to 8a.
You shall not go around as a gossip monger amidst your people. You shall not stand by the shedding of your fellow's blood.
Yeah.
I am the Lord.
These are two different mitzvot that are grouped together in Leviticus. We'll read it in about a month. A is you shouldn't be a gossip monger. Shouldn't tell stories. Go around telling stories. And a separate mitzvah is don't stand by idly. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. Lo ta'amod, which means do not stand. Al dam, reyach dam in Hebrew means blood.
Dam is blood.
Don't stand by while someone's blood is being shed. We have a mitzvah. One of the 613 mitzvot is we have a responsibility to act. By the way, this is parenthetical. Maybe I shouldn't do it because of time, but I always found it interesting. In this chapter of Leviticus, it groups many mitzvot in the same pasuk, in the same verse. And that's not random. Why would it be that these two mitzvot are grouped together
I was wondering that.
in the same? Judy, you have a?
Yeah, well, it's got to do with lashon hara, with gossip, because you shouldn't go around spreading gossip, and you shouldn't be listening to it either, because gossip is equivalent to just
Shedding blood. The
shedding blood.
Talmud writes, so gossip is spiritually and can even lead to physically spilling of blood. Okay. What else?
Well, I'm just gonna say that they both are concerned with community, the cohesion of the community.
Mhm.
If you stand by, then there's no civilization. And again, gossip can destroy too, so it's more about our tribal community.
Beautiful. And I want to touch on what Marty is saying, and just an idea. I think it's deep. So we're not supposed to gossip. We're not supposed to tell stories. Someone might come to the wrong conclusion. Say, you know what? I don't want to gossip. I'm just gonna be like a hermit over here. I don't want to get involved in anyone's life over here. I'll just do my thing. I want to make sure not to violate the avera, the sin of gossip. Torah says, Don't run to the other extreme, in which you don't involve, you don't engage, you don't know what's going on, because you might be needed to take action. So that's the way I understand. We can't, go to the other extreme as well. So it's an interesting juxtaposition. In any event.
But the saying is also do not believe in it. You can hear it, you shouldn't hear it. But if you hear it, you're obligated not to believe it.
That's about Lashon Hara. Yeah.
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 So
Correct.
in a way, it kind of opens a door for you to kind of, maybe do something about it.
Correct.
Like you were saying.
Correct. Good. That's another perspective. So if you look in the Code of Jewish Law, it says, I'm going to summarize, whenever a person can save another person's life, he fails to do so, he transgresses the negative commandment of you shall not stand by. And similarly, this is if someone's drowning or being attacked, there's many examples in Maimonides, What is interesting is even in the modern Israeli government, this is one area in which they did take Torah law. And in 1998, they passed a Lo Tamod al Dam Re'echa. And, it's one example of where they did institute that in modern law itself. And it goes back to rights versus responsibilities. I want to go even beyond that. The purpose of life why would Judaism be so involved in secular law or with a secular mindset? I'm here to live my life, right? Comfort, let him live. I'm not getting involved. It's not my business. That's not a Torah perspective. A Torah perspective is we are here to accomplish something in the world. That's why it's responsibility based. We're not living for ourselves. And the goal of life is not even to be perfect and be a saint, but be a hermit. The purpose of life is to affect change for the better in the world. And as such, it follows, it makes sense why there is such a law. So then the question then is what happens when there's some personal risk involved? There's an interesting story actually in Tel Aviv some years ago, and I have the person's name. His name is Yasmin Feingold. He was an Israeli rowing champion. And in 2009, Yasmin, her boat somehow capsized in Tel Aviv's Yarkon. How do you pronounce the river in Tel Aviv? The Yarkon River? Anyone familiar with the river in Tel Aviv? Okay.
Yarkon.
Now that river, the Yarkon River, was known, especially in those times, as being extremely dirty and filthy and even toxic. And there was a time in 1997 during the Maccabi Games where a bridge collapsed and 4 of the athletes were killed not by drowning, but by infection by a fungus in the water.
Lovely.
I don't know if you remember that. So when her boat capsized, they had that question, the person watching, should he take action or not? And he did. His name was Avi Toibin, and he became, he saved her life, and he was fine in the end. But it raised this whole discussion in Israel about that. So the question then becomes, what happens when your own life is in danger? And there's a lot of debate about this in the Talmud. I think because of time, we're not going to do all these texts here. The Jerusalem Talmud. We know that there's a Talmud in both Babylonia and in Jerusalem. In 10a, you'll notice that the Jerusalem Talmud mentions that you are obligated to put yourself in possible danger if someone else will certainly die and yours is only a risk. You are obligated to put yourself in danger. That is an opinion in the Jerusalem Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud argues that point. And the conclusion in Jewish law, in halacha, is if there is substantial risk to your own life, you do not have an obligation to save someone else. If there is substantial, unlike what it says in the Jerusalem Talmud, that if someone else is certainly going to die, and for you, there's a risk of dying or not, the Jerusalem Talmud seems to suggest you have to. Babylonian Talmud argues on that point, and it would be interesting to go through the source texts and understand them all. And the conclusion there is that you do not have to put your own life in risk. You don't have to. You're not obligated to do so in order to save someone else. And you'll see this codified in Jewish law, in the Code of Jewish Law 215, where we have been reading. One reading. Text 13a.
Page 215.
Yeah.
13A, you said?
Mm-hmm.
13, which one?
13a.
Yeah. One who sees a boat sinking in the sea, it is a mitzvah upon every person to even desecrate the Shabbat in order to save them. Nevertheless, if there is danger involved, he is not to endanger himself in order to save his fellow, although he witnesses his fellow's death.
And there's discussion, can you or can you not? It's, here you're not obligated to save yourself if you could die in the process. Why not? And text 13b is a continuation. Why don't you read for us, Bert?
Although it is uncertain that he will die and his fellow will definitely lose his life, Nevertheless, it is stated, you shall observe my statutes and my ordinances, which a man shall do and live by them, and not that one should put himself at risk of death as a result of observing Torah's statement to not serve by your fellow's blood.
There is a mitzvah in the Torah, do the mitzvot v'chai bahem, and live by them, implying we do the mitzvot and live, but we don't have an obligation to fulfill any of the mitzvot in the Torah, save the big three, if we are going to die or we could die. And in Jewish law today, this is the accepted practice as far as obligation goes. Not could, but obligation, as far as the mitzvah of don't stand by idly.
Yeah.
You're not responsible to truly risk your own life. Responsible, obligated, couldn't be held against you in court in the old days if you're going to truly risk your life. Now the question is, what does truly mean? And let me take one, and then I'll take
I have a
questions.
question though, it's not forbidden though, it just, so it's not like if you risk your life and save someone, you haven't violated a commandment.
It's debated, and generally that's right, the understanding. Generally, you still can, but are not obligated to do so. Correct. So there is discussion, however, on and this is an interesting issue to think about. God forbid a subway about to hit someone. I mean, these are real life situations where, thank God, I've never been in, but you never know. You never know in life. And what it does say is any sort of danger that you would put yourself in for business, for pleasure, for recreation, you're expected to go to that same level to save someone else. So you hear that? You know,
I think I have to jump out of the plane.
meaning if you go bungee, if you go bungee jumping, or if there are certain things you will do in your own life, maybe stage 5 rapids, you know, if you will involve yourself a certain level of riskful activities in your own life, you're expected to at least go to that level to save someone else. So that is debated in Jewish law. You can't just say, oh, I don't want to put myself in any risk. Everything involves some element of risk. So, but at least according to dry law, and we might have to do this class for a few weeks here, according to dry law, you're not obligated to save other people if you're good chance you're going to die in the process. And now we can go back to, and I'm going to have to save questions for a few minutes. I apologize because we're running out of time here. And in fact, it even quotes a verse that when God tells Moses to go back to Egypt, he was in Midian for a little bit, to go save the Jews. God says, go back to Egypt. Don't worry, the people who wanted to kill you are no longer alive anymore. Why did God have to tell Moses that? You would think if God tells you to go back to Egypt, you go back to Egypt. But a person is not obligated to put their life in danger to fulfill a mitzvah. So God actually has to clarify to Moses, yeah, you're a dead man when you went back in Egypt, don't worry about that anymore. But God has to tell that. It's a very odd verse in the Bible. I don't know if you remember that. Now let's go back to the story of Esther. And now this is one way of understanding the back and forth. One way of understanding the back and forth here is that Esther said, I understand the situation, but I don't know if it's the right thing to kill myself in order to save other people. Halachically, they're having a Talmudic debate over here. Am I expected to walk into Achashverosh, which is a good chance of me dying? In those days, that really might have been, in order to have a chance of maybe saving other people. To which Mordechai has to respond, no, the regular halachic discussion doesn't apply here. Guess why? You too, no, well, not just that, you too might die. You see why?
Oh, so she's not at elevated risk.
Correct. You're together with, so that's part of this discussion back and forth. He responds to her, you too, it can get out that you're Jewish. You're in the same court. It's not risking your life to save others. You're part of the same discussion as well. So we asked the question at the beginning, the unsalted meat, it sounds so odd of her to be worried about herself at a time like this. Some explain this as a Talmudic discussion going back and forth. And it was not until Mordechai pointed out that her own life was in danger that she said, I'm willing to take the plunge. And I will finish today. You can read these texts to yourself. I'll finish today with the Rebbe's final perspective. And the Rebbe's final perspective is one of a more spiritual nature. as Pam, you pointed out a little bit earlier. And that is as follows. The back and forth going on here was Mordecai telling Esther, this is not a regular situation. This is not a regular case. What are the odds that out of thousands of girls in Shushan, you, little Jewish Queen Esther, little Esther, was chosen to be the queen? You didn't even want it. You were trying to run away from it. You didn't dress up. They chose you. Don't you feel there's an element of divine providence here at play? And you read the verses again. Who knows if this is the reason why? What was the verse there? Powerful verse. I'll read it a little bit differently than the way you read it before. Who knows whether at a time like this you attain the kingdom? One way we read that is, who knows when you do come in whether you'll still be queen? I'm reading it differently. Who knows if this is the reason why you were appointed queen? Don't you see a script being written right now? This might not be the time for Talmudic debates on the nature of whether or not one needs to risk their life for someone else. You right now have the ability to be the vehicle through which God achieves salvation for the Jews. And if you do not, you and your father's house will perish. As you pointed out, Pam, this was your moment in history. This was the time for which perhaps your neshama, your soul, came into the world. And for decades beforehand, your whole family was gearing up to this moment. Perish need not mean literal, it could be spiritual. And the Rebbe finishes off just in a practical lesson in our own lives. Text 19a, the same can be said to each one of us. Who knows whether you've attained the throne for a time like this? When you have an opportunity to save someone else, and the Rebbe writes spiritually as well, you might protest. I haven't been called to the king. Who am I? I have no influence. They won't listen. I'm just one person. I don't have the power to change the world. I'll just do my little thing. And who knows? We don't know the reason why each one of our souls came down to the world. Maybe it was for this moment. And there's a certain element of divine providence we have to recognize in our lives. And I'll finish with a little episode that happened to me about a year ago. That was I got a call from another rabbi who said that I got a suicidal call from someone who was driving. There was a Jew actually from New York and driving aimlessly down the 95. They were in suicidal mood. I tried speaking to them, but to no avail. But I know they're in your area right now. They just passed your area. Give them a call. And it was, I forgot, it was like 2 days before Yom Kippur, right before Rosh Hashanah. It was like
busy time.
not what but obviously such a thing like that. And I called them and they did pick up. And they first of all, they said they hadn't eaten in a day and a half. They were like a hunger thing. And I'll spare you all the details right now. It took a lot. I wanted them to go to the police or call a hotline. They refused to. I stayed on the phone with them for an extended amount of time, just speaking to them until I got them to turn and come and meet me at Chabad area, okay? And my wife, honestly, we were like, kind of, was there some element of danger over here? I don't know who this person was. Well, of course, you do it at a time like that. I remember being a little spooked out, and I spoke to them for a long time. Spent a long time with them that day, and I got them to eat. That was the first thing I did. And I gave them a destination to go to in the direction in which they were traveling. And I didn't hear from the person. 6 months later, they called me to thank me, and they were getting help that they needed, And it was, thank God. I don't think I didn't do anything special. I happened to be in the right place at the right time, and God hopefully put the right words in my mouth to say this person, to tell this person. But it was one of those moments where it would have been very easy, to do maybe the minimal effort just to feel I did something. I wouldn't have. Of course, I was going to call the person. But I was on the phone with them for an extended amount of time and really felt this might be a reason why I was put over here. And I hope I did the right thing. And we have to look out for those opportunities in life. And when they come, embrace them. So we'll hold it over here. Thank you for anyone that tuned in via the online stream. God willing, we'll be here same time, same place next week. And we'll make an special effort of starting on time. Apologize to those that were waiting for the stream. And a special thanks to Amnon Nissan of Nissan Communications for making this stream possible to people all over the world. Happy Purim, everyone.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health In with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Parent Dome with Ryan Miller, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.